Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, August 7th, 2008. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week, Fred Johnson, scientist and home brewer from Apex, North Carolina, joins us to share the results of his experiment evaluating common wort aeration techniques. Which is better at getting oxygen into wort, shaking the fermenter or using an aquarium pump? Well, if you're new to home brewing or would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through both basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And you can follow me on Twitter. My username is Basic Brewing, all one word. And by the way, last week I did a little unscientific, informal poll on Twitter asking what people thought would be more effective, the shaking the fermenter or using the aquarium pump. And the aquarium pump won out 2-1 in that very unscientific, very informal poll. So it'll be interesting to see how Fred's experiment shakes out this week, so to speak. If you'll remember, last week, Jeremy from Duluth, Minnesota, wrote in to ask about the best way to clean a better bottle. He wanted to get the gunk out, but he was afraid he'd scratch the bottle if he used a bottle brush. We got a ton of feedback with suggestions for Jeremy, so I thought I'd dedicate the mailbag this week to this issue. Chris Alvey from the blog brew365.com was the first to weigh in. Chris says, I'm a big fan of using the better bottle and have found the following method pretty sufficient. Number 1, soak with PBW. That's powdered brewery wash from 5 Star Chemicals, by the way. Soak with PBW and hot water for a while right after emptying. Number 2, pour 99% of the PBW solution out and put a small face-sized washcloth into the better bottle. Number 3, swoosh the better bottle around and the cloth travels around all sides of the better bottle and scrubs it without scratching. Well, that sounds brilliant. Sounds like a great idea. Chris wrote an article on brew365.com about using better bottles, and if I remember, I'll post a link to that page in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. And if I forget, let me know. So, Jason from Kentucky weighs in with this. Jason says a carboy brush will scratch a better bottle. Jason says, I scratched one of mine the first time I cleaned it. I then tried wrapping a sock around the brush, but the stiff bristles poked right through and added even more scratches. So Jason says, now I soak my better bottles in hot water and OxyClean. This usually removes the gunk in a few hours. On those occasions that OxyClean can't get all the gunk out, I use hot water and bleach. It works great, Jason says. Just let it sit overnight and remember to rinse well. Well, thanks, Jason. Yes, be very sure to rinse well after using a bleach solution, by the way. And I would imagine you wouldn't have to use much bleach to get the job done. So a little dab will do you with the bleach. Dale from Hillsborough, North Carolina writes, I use a better bottle, and you should absolutely, under no circumstance, use a carboy brush or anything else that would scratch. The better bottle is made from plastic, so that's a big no-no. I use hot tap water and OxyClean, again with a OxyClean, to clean mine. A good rinsing, followed by an OxyClean swirl and soak, followed by a thorough rinsing, does the trick. This is definitely one of those less is better situations. Thanks, Dale. Philip from Fort Worth, Texas writes with this, my opinion, OxyClean is the best for cleaning better bottles. As soon as I transfer the beer to the secondary, I will clean as much of the leftover crud out by shaking warm water around in the bottle. Then I add a full scoop of OxyClean in very warm water and fill it to the top. I will let it stand for at least an hour to an hour and a half. At times, it will look like that the bottle is full of 7-Up as the OxyClean removes all the gunk. Looking very closely at the bottle after cleaning, I do not see any residue. I feel confident this is a good method. On brew day, I repeat the process and then use iodophor like normal. Philip says, I do not use a carboy brush on my better bottle. Actually, I would be concerned about using a carboy brush on a better bottle. I think that would cause scratches. So, common theme. Philip also has some further use for OxyClean. He says, I also use OxyClean for my bottles. When I empty a bottle, I immediately rinse well and place upside down in my dishwasher for cleaning. Now, you'll get some arguments there about putting the bottles in the dishwasher for cleaning. But apparently it works for Philip. Philip says, then on the morning of bottling day, I fill the kitchen sink with warm water and OxyClean. I fill each bottle to the top and sit them on the counter for a couple of hours. Then I drain and rinse each bottle and place them upside down in the dishwasher to run for a 2-hour antibacterial cycle with no dishwashing soap. I've not had any problems using this procedure. And Philip continues, one more note about OxyClean. It does a really nice job on the sink, too. After filling all my bottles, the sink is spotless. I always worry about stains from iodophor when working in our kitchen. OxyClean leaves everything looking very clean. And by the way, I use iodophor in my white porcelain sink. No stains. Philip goes on. This is Philip's show today. Teasing you, Philip. On the better bottle, Philip says, James, seriously, get one today. Be sure to get the number 10 drilled stopper, too. They are the best. Here's some reasons why. Number 1, weight. Shaking a glass carboy around is heavy, not to mention dangerous. Shaking a better bottle with a gallon of iodophor is like shaking a gallon of milk. Furthermore, lifting and moving a better bottle versus a carboy, no comparison. You'll be surprised how much nicer your day goes without back problems. I have a brew hauler strap on mine. I can move this thing around with one hand. Makes a huge difference. Number 2, design. Whoever the smart guy was that designed this thing understands homebrewing. When you go buy yours today, Philip's getting a commission, I think. Notice the bottom of the bottle. It is conical shaped. It raises to a point approximately 2 inches from the base. This makes racking to a secondary simple because most of the yeast is physically below the siphon intake. To quote the Guinness commercial, brilliant. Number 3, safety. I'm not concerned about breakage. Slippery carboys create damage to property and can change your plans from brew day fun to emergency room nightmare. We heard a bit about that with the Brewing Nightmare show. That's just me talking. Not to mention that deductibles and follow-up doctor visits, not to mention the deductibles and follow-up doctor visits. Slippery, better bottles, bounce. And number 4, cost-effective. One better bottle is much less expensive than a visit to the emergency room or a visit to the carpet cleaning service. Well, thanks, Philip. And by the way, I didn't mention this last time. I meant to, but last news I heard that there was kind of a carboy crisis in that they're no longer making carboys in Mexico, or at least one distributor is no longer making 6.5-gallon carboys, at least in Mexico. So there may be a shortage of glass carboys. So better bottles, they may get a better bottle boost. Finally, Michael, who is known as Revy on Homebrew Talk, the homebrewtalk.com forum, sends this in. I'm a confirmed better bottle user primarily because I like to keep my blood on the inside of my skin and have heard way too many horror stories. And I'm admittedly way too klutzy to feel comfortable with glass carboys. I had a couple of close calls with a 5-gallon glass one that came with my kit. So when I started to add more equipment, I went with a better bottle. Having said that, I know a thing or two about cleaning them, says Michael. A carboy brush really isn't a good idea. There's too much a risk of scratching the plastic. Even the literature on the Better Bottle website cautions against this. What I found that works the most is a long soak with OxyClean and water. By long, I mean anywhere from 24 hours to a week. The bubbling action of the OxyClean or any of the generic forms of this available in most big box and some dollar stores breaks through even the toughest Kreuzen rings on the carboy. Michaels has followed this up with a thorough rinse. I find that a jet bottle washer that fits on my sink works perfectly for this. So far, I have never met a Kreuzen or any tough brewery mess that OxyClean, warm water, and patience didn't take care of. And Michael continues, I'm part of the homebrewtalk.com online community, and others have mentioned that for the extra tough gunk, they do use their carboy brush, but they wrap the bristles with a soft cloth like a piece of T-shirt. And Michael says, speaking of Homebrew Talk, I would also mention that the forum creator has started something new and exciting, a MySpace-type social networking site for homebrewers. So we'll have to check that out. Well, thanks, everybody, for all that excellent information. And I swear that Better Bottle isn't sponsoring this show this week. But there you go. If you ask for help, you get it here on Basic Brewing Radio. Appreciate everybody for participating. All right, let's move into the interview for this week. Fred Johnson has been a follower of our podcasts since pretty much the beginning. Fred and I have traded email over the years and have even had a lively debate or two on brewing techniques. Can you imagine? This week, Fred joins us to share his experiment testing whether shaking the fermenter is as effective in wort aeration as pumping air into the wort with a pump. Well, Fred Johnson, welcome to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thank you, James.
You are Fred from Apex, North Carolina. Those who have listened to our archives for over 3 years now will recognize your name popping up every now and then. And you are one of those who you catch me doing things every now and then, like not flaming the the lip of the growler when I'm doing a starter and things like that. And you call me on those things, and I actually appreciate that.
Just trying to help.
So give us a little background. You've designed a scientific experiment, and you've sent the documentation, which I will post a link to on the site. But it's obvious from the write-up that you have a background in formal science. Yes,
I do. I don't want to lose our listeners, but I was actually trained as in experimental pathology, and I taught in medical school for several years, graduate students primarily. Then I left there and went into pharmaceutical research, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm actually doing clinical research for a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, okay. So you're helping to heal us for the future.
That's the idea, yes.
or develop products that we have the 4-minute-long commercials for on TV.
That's right. But my passion is for the laboratory, actually, and that's where this comes from after a couple of decades of being in the laboratory.
So tell us about the experiment. What question were you trying to answer through this experiment?
Well, as you know, James, we always are trying to introduce a good amount of oxygen into our wort before the fermentation starts. And we don't need to go into why that is, just to say that the yeast appreciate it and help us to perform our fermentations. And there are so many different ways one might get oxygen into the wort, and I've never really known which might be more effective than another. We've always heard of different ways of doing it. We've seen professionals do it different ways. And I've frankly heard of some statements about ways that wouldn't work, and I just didn't believe them. So I thought, well, I maybe I ought to just measure it myself. So I actually had to go to the trouble to finding a dissolved oxygen meter to do these experiments, because that's the only real way to measure it.
And you bring out a good point. A lot of the time, and I'm guilty on this program as much as anybody else, we say things that we say as fact in talking about the methods and the techniques that we use in brewing, and here's what you do and why, when in fact we're just kind of passing on this information that we've been given before, and we really haven't taken the time to verify, or may not have the ability to verify, whether that information is true. So it's fun to do these kinds of experiments to kind of see what is reality in all this, kind of folklore that we're passing on in telling people how to brew. Right.
And actually that's part of my background, is learning not to make statements unless you really know that it's true. As a scientist, you get called on the carpet for making those kinds of things. In fact, your reputation will go away pretty quickly. A good reputation would go away pretty quickly if you said enough things that just simply weren't true.
Well, luckily we don't have that problem here.
Well, We're talking about me or you, James?
No, I'm talking about me.
Oh, just kidding around here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you follow the archives for 3 years, you can see I've changed my tune a couple of times on a couple of things. So
you're a good man, James.
So talk about the experiment. What are we measuring, and what is the setup? How did you go about doing it?
Okay, sure. I knew that I wasn't going to do a bunch of experiments using wort, but I also knew that it wasn't really going to be necessary to test different ways of getting oxygen to dissolve. So the experiments were done with just water, but I was using a plastic bucket carboy and a glass carboy because they actually lend themselves to different methods of aerating. The water was boiled, so it was as free of oxygen as it could be to begin with, and then it was transferred in a standard way by, in my case, I pumped it from the boil kettle into the fermenters, and then I proceeded to introduce air into the water by different methods.
Now, did you measure how long did you boil beforehand? How long do you have to boil to get the free oxygen out of the water?
Actually, that's a good question, James, and I did not measure the boiling water to measure the oxygen content of that, just because I thought it was going to be a little bit it could damage the electrode. It was boiled for at least 10 minutes before it was transferred, and I think it takes very little time really to get in boiling water for the oxygen to be minimized. I don't have a measurement of that though, James.
And maybe you can answer a question that I wish I had it in front of me. Someone wrote in that said, "You're talking about introducing oxygen into water. Well, isn't water half oxygen? I mean, H2O, it's hydrogen and oxygen, right? How are you getting more oxygen into the water? It's a different thing, right?"
That's right. We're talking about bimolecular oxygen, O2, and it's dissolved in as free oxygen. It's not in a combined state with hydrogen.
So we're talking about essentially mixing in free oxygen molecules, the O2 molecules, in with the H2O molecules. It's not like you're combining and making a new chemical. You're kind of making a stew there and mixing in oxygen molecules and water molecules.
Right, and that's what we're always talking about when we're talking about introducing oxygen into the wort. We're talking about getting oxygen that is in the air or from a bottle of oxygen dissolved into the solution.
And it's important to do that because the yeast needs oxygen to make cells to get ready to ferment. And when you do boil the wort, that free oxygen is depleted. So you need to replace that in some way. Talk about the aeration methods that you were evaluating.
Okay. Well, I approached this thinking, well, I would like to do this the way most home brewers would likely do it. And I didn't use a lot of sophisticated methods. Basically, the methods I used were to pump air in with a pump, and I did it at two different rates. One was at a rate that might be delivered by an aquarium pump that I actually had bought from a flea market a number of years ago, and this was just one of these little small aquarium pumps. I think I've actually seen them sold in home brew stores also. And that pump delivered about 99 milliliters per minute. And so I actually used, instead of using that particular pump, I used another pump delivering at that same rate because I could deliver all my oxygen with this same pump by just varying the rate at which I turn the pump on. Mm-hmm. It's a variable speed pump.
And when you say delivering oxygen, we're actually delivering air.
Thank you for the correction. That's an important correction. I was always pumping air in this case.
Just air from the room.
Air from the room. So the experiment was done with delivering the air at 99 milliliters per minute versus a higher rate at 1,009 milliliters per minute. That is approximately 1 liter per minute. And that happened to be the high rate at which this pump would pump. And I did it in two different ways. It went into the carboy filled with about, I think it was 5.5 gallons of water, either through a racking cane that went to the bottom of the fermenter, to the bottom of the fermenter of water, or I put an aeration stone, a 2-micron pore size stainless steel aeration stone on the end of that racking cane. So I did two experiments, one at 99 milliliters per minute with no stone, one at more like a liter per minute with no stone, another two experiments at 99 milliliters per minute with the stone, and another experiment with the stone at 1 liter per minute. And then the final experiment that was performed was actually by just putting the water into a plastic bucket and using a method of shaking that we typically use. In fact, I did that for a number of years before I decided I think I want something that's a little easier than shaking. Yeah. And then actually, when I moved from buckets to carboys, that's when I definitely quit shaking, just because I was afraid I was going to kill myself.
Yeah, both your straining your back and actually knocking that sucker over and breaking it on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah, it does get harder when you're shaking a glass carboy rather than a plastic bucket, for sure.
I'm sorry, there's also some scrapes on my countertop from all the shaking and rocking I've done over the years, and again, another reason for getting away from that method. But as you'll see, there's something to be said for that method. We'll be getting to that in a little bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about the method. It's not actually picking up the fermenter and shaking it, in your two arms. There is a more logical method to the madness there.
That's right. Although people do these, I think I've heard of putting them on your knees and rocking it back and forth. I didn't actually try that, but this was just simply taking the bucket, leaning it toward me, so that it's kind of on its bottom edge, balanced in a way, and just very gently just rocking it back and forth. And if you had a camera on me right now, I'd be actually doing it in the air because I'm trying to describe it. So it wasn't anything hugely vigorous. It was just a gentle rocking back and forth, and you can hear it splashing around inside.
Now, I tried to shake that sucker just as hard as I could, and maybe that's why I got tired so quickly. But you're saying just a gentle, more of a gentle. At what rate is a gentle rocking of the carboy? Well,
believe it or not, I actually measured it. It was close to a couple of shakes per second.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like one dun 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 dun.
So just back forth, back forth, back forth, back forth. Okay.
Right. Well, the momentum of the water inside sort of helped me keep the rhythm.
Well, you did. There is kind of a natural, wavelength to that.
Exactly.
That bucket that you'll find.
I'm always interested in doing what's easy, So this was the easiest way. Not trying to kill myself. I figured slow and easy and slow makes it work.
Now you did discover before you even have you mentioned the method of actually sampling the oxygen in the solution?
No, I haven't described that. It's done with a dissolved oxygen meter, which has what is called a Clark electrode, and the Clark electrode is simply much like you see a pH meter has an electrode. You dangle the electrode down into the solution that you're measuring the dissolved oxygen in, and it has a membrane that is permeable to oxygen and some other gases, but it protects these polarized electrodes behind the membrane, and as oxygen crosses over that membrane, it is consumed basically by the sensor behind that membrane, and it conducts a current. It causes a current to be generated, and you're simply measuring the current that is produced as that oxygen dissolves. So as the rate at which it moves across that membrane is directly proportional to the concentration of oxygen in the water in this case, and so the more oxygen that moves across that membrane, the more current will be generated by the electrode, and it just simply reads out on a meter.
So this is a sophisticated instrument. This isn't just something you'd go down to Radio Shack and get.
I couldn't find it at Radio Shack, but eBay will produce anything.
Well, there you go. So I think we've covered the setup, right? I mean, you got your methods, and you've got your the containers that you've got, and we've got our water in the fermenters. And you discovered something even before you started testing the aeration methods. You discovered something about just the process of moving water from one vessel to another, right?
Yes, this was probably perhaps the biggest surprise I had. And that is that even just the simple delivery of the water from the kettle into the carboy or the bucket caused a significant, let's just say there was a significant amount of oxygen already dissolved in the water before I even made any attempts to actively aerate. The range, at a minimum, when I very gently delivered the water to the bottom of the bucket, still had about 45% saturation before I even started aerating.
So you delivered the water to the bottom of the bucket, but then you splashed the water in through the top of the carboy.
Right. When I put it into the carboy, the water exited the tubing near the top of the carboy and just fell to the bottom. And in that case, there was already 55 to 65% of saturation just from simply delivering the water to the carboy that way.
So we're already doing pretty good if you splash it.
We're already. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
That's exactly right, James. There was already a lot of oxygen in that water before I even started aerating.
And that is reflected on the chart that you've got in your documentation. So we're not exactly comparing apples to oranges here. You've got that all laid out.
That's right. I was expecting these values to be very low, like close to no oxygen in there, but there certainly was.
Now let's start out with the. So what did you do? You started the oxygen or aeration methods and measured the oxygen levels periodically.
Right. What I did was I just simply put the electrode into the carboy. In the case of the carboys, it could just stay in the carboys. I turned on my pumps to deliver the air through the racking cane with or without aeration stones. And then every 5 minutes, I simply took a reading off of the meter and recorded that. And I did that for up to 90 minutes.
And what did you do on the shaking part?
In the shaking part, I had to I couldn't keep the electrode in the carboy because I wanted to put the lid on the carboy, the bucket, and shake the bucket for a few minutes, and then every 5 minutes I would open up the bucket, put the electrode back in, and measure the oxygen content, take it back out, and then shake it for another 5 minutes and repeat that.
Okay. So now I think we've got the whole process. I think we've got we've got a picture of Fred there working with his buckets and his
right.
Were family members walking in while you were doing this, or was it?
I actually did it in the garage, and I don't. Yes, I think my wife found something else to do while I was doing all this craziness.
Well, if she's used to brewing, she's used to this kind of stuff. So
you're absolutely right.
So let's start getting into the results. What was the worst?
Well, the pumping air into the carboy without an aeration stone at the rate that my aquarium pump delivered it was very poor at getting oxygen to dissolve. The numbers are in the paper. Let me get that real quick. Well, let's just say after 90 minutes of aerating, I probably only had about 70% saturation by that method.
And starting from...
it started at about 55%, and it fairly slowly crept up to only about, I guess it's 75% looking at the chart here, in 90 minutes. So
Wow.
we should be getting up to over 90% saturation before we're going to be happy.
So that's with the pressure, the air pressure that would be with a standard aquarium pump, with a filter in line, by the way.
Oh, no, that one was without the filter.
Oh, without the filter.
No, I'm sorry. I need to back up, James. I actually did put a filter on this. So, and I would recommend if you do pump air into your wort that you use filtered air so that you're not pumping bugs into your wort.
Right. But you were duplicating the conditions of a home brewing environment in that you had this inline filter that a home brewer would use in his setup. But no aeration stone in this first one.
That's right.
And
thank you.
And we're getting poor results with this.
Yes. Now, putting the aeration stone and delivering it at 99 milliliters per minute did improve somewhat. And after 90 minutes, I was up to, about 79% saturation. But that's still not very good.
Wow.
So, so the one important thing I learned was that you need to put air in faster. So when I went to 1 liter per minute, pumping air into the carboy through a racking cane without an aeration stone, I did significantly improve the aeration rate, oxygenation rate. So that let me actually get the paper handy real quick because I've forgotten the actual numbers. With the aeration stone, without the aeration stone at 1 liter per minute, I had 64% saturation in 15 minutes and 90% saturation in 90 minutes.
Wow.
I want to emphasize it still took 90 minutes to get 90% saturation at that flow rate without the aeration stone.
And that's a long time.
Yeah,
especially
it is.
If you have ever tried to aerate using an aquarium pump, you know what happens. I mean, this is water, and water is one thing, but wort is another thing entirely. Yeah. When you start to aerate with an aeration stone, it's not too long until the head builds up on your wort, and unless you stop and take a break and let it, collapse back down, it's going to be coming out of the top of the carboy.
And it happened to me a lot of times. Yes, that's right. Probably in about 5 minutes, I would normally have to stop if I'm pumping in air at this rate.
So you're talking about extending that 90 minutes. That's 90 minutes of actual aeration time with that pump.
Yep.
And that doesn't count the times that you got to stop and let the stuff settle back down.
Right. Now, I want to jump ahead to putting the aeration stone on that.
Okay.
When I pumped air in with the aeration stone, it's a 2-micron stone, and you can get smaller pore sizes. I know you can get at least a 1-micron pore size, which probably would make even a better difference. I had a substantial improvement when I used 1 liter per minute, and I was able to get 90% saturation in only 20 minutes. So I was actually quite pleased with that. But not until I had done that experiment did I realize that I really need to go as long as 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I probably have been happy with going 5 minutes, letting it stop and letting the head collapse and then start up again. And after, 2 or 3 of those sessions, I was probably tired of doing it. But I learned that I really ought to go a good 20 minutes if I'm going to deliver air that way.
Now, if someone's going to duplicate the kind of results that you got from that level of pumping air, what kind of pump are they going to have? Do they have big aquarium pumps, or what kind of pump are you going to have to deliver that rate of air?
Well, I don't know exactly, James. I was using a Masterflex pump, which is a peristaltic tubing pump. But a lot of people are using these centrifugal type pumps, I think they are, or magnetic drive pumps. And I think those deliver a lot of volume, so I think those would probably work just fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much the larger aquarium pumps will deliver. I don't know what those are.
But at that rate, you still have to go 20 minutes to get 90%
right.
Saturation. So what about the shaken? How does, if people are saying, I'm going to step up, I've been shaken, but I want to improve my aeration methods, I'm going to buy me an aquarium pump.
Yeah.
How does shaken actually work?
Well, I guess I was really surprised, James. Shaking is by far the best method. In a very, very short time, probably in only 5 minutes time with my little gentle rocking method, I got over 95% saturation.
Wow.
And I said, I wonder if I actually believed the meter. And I actually did repeat that experiment just to prove to myself that it really was going in that fast. And by the way, I will say that was the one in which, that was the experiment in the bucket in which I very carefully delivered the water to the bottom, so it had the minimum amount of oxygen to begin with. And yet, like I said, in 5 minutes time, I was over 90% saturated by just gently rocking it.
So you went from like 43% saturation to over 90% saturation with just shaking in 5 minutes.
Exactly. That's right.
Wow. That makes me feel better about the early times of my brewing career.
I know. It's a great method of getting air in, and it's sanitary because you can seal the bucket up. You're not pumping any air in other than what is in the headspace. And let me make another point there. Let's not forget that when we stop doing this, we still have a whole bunch of air in that carboy or in that bucket just from the headspace, and it will continue to dissolve into the wort, just letting it sit.
So what about the method that I'm using now, which is an oxygen tank and a stone? Did you measure, or did you think about putting that into the equation as well?
Well, I think it's an excellent idea to use oxygen and see how it compares. As I said in the paper, there is some added expense there, and I'm not sure if one can easily control the amount that one gets in. I think if you saturated the wort, you could do some damage to the yeast. I think wort saturated with oxygen probably is toxic to the yeast. Although I'm not sure if one actually achieves that by the brief bursts of oxygen that people typically use when they're trying to use pure oxygen. I don't have any experience using pure oxygen, so I think that would be an additional experiment that was worth doing.
That'd be the sequel.
Yeah, that's right.
Now there's another topic that I've gotten mixed information on. I've talked to both Chris White and David Logston, the founders of the major American yeast companies, and I asked them point blank. I said, if I'm pumping oxygen, through an air stone at the beginning of the fermentation, can I pump in too much oxygen? And they both said no, basically.
Okay.
And that it's not for an extended period of time, and once the fermentation starts, any excess, or active fermentation starts, any excess free oxygen is going to be driven off and out through the airlock. So I think that, and again, I have no data to back this up. This is just me talking, saying things that other people have said. But from what I've heard from the yeast guys, unless you're just running an O2 pump, for 12 hours in through the first of your fermentation, if you just run your oxygen in there for a couple minutes at the beginning of your fermentation, you shouldn't have to worry.
Yeah, I don't think you'd have to worry with that amount. But I do wonder how much oxygen you're actually getting in. I haven't ever seen numbers for how much oxygen you dissolve in wort with those brief bursts. Mm-hmm. I think that's something if I don't do the experiment, I'd like to see somebody else do it.
Yeah, I would actually, because here I've invested, probably $50 in the regulator and another $8, per tank of oxygen that I have, and I'm spending the time to boil the air stone and to sanitize it, and I'm feeling good about pumping the oxygen in there for a couple of minutes at the beginning of fermentation. But I've got to think. And I've thought about this because when you run the oxygen into the wort, you've got this chimney of bubbles that's coming up, and they're coming out on top of the wort. And I'm thinking, now that oxygen's not staying in there.
That's right.
How does that work?
Well, I think certainly the size of the bubbles will make a difference. And if you could actually somehow generate some turbulence in the wort as you're oxygenating, that would increase the contact time between the air or the oxygen and the wort.
Fred, are you telling me I've got to shake and do that?
That would be ideal. In fact, I know that the pros have devices that when they're introducing air into the line, there are devices that generate turbulence in the wort as it's passing through, just to improve the contact time.
Well, I do bob the little bobber down, in through the wort as I'm. I know that's not a scientific term, but I do bob the air stone around in the wort, thinking, oh well, I'll get this area now, and over. And I've had a couple of beers by that time, so it seems to make sense at that point.
Well, James, anybody that reads my paper will realize that I actually write a whole lot better than I speak. So I recommend anyone to read the paper instead of listening to this, because they'll actually get the real information from the paper instead of my jabbering and my rambling.
Oh, but you're so much more approachable, speaking to you than reading your stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty dry.
So I guess the bottom line is between introducing air through an aquarium pump or an air pump up to the rates that you specified, you are better off, if you're using an air stone, you're better off just shaking the carboy or shaking the bucket for 5 minutes.
Yep. And if you're going to pump air in, pump it in fast and use an air stone.
Well, that there's if people listen to this, there's going to be some questions. There's probably going to be some controversy, because I think I've heard the opposite out there, and I don't know if there's been any scientific research to back up the other side of the equation there.
Well, I would welcome questions. I know you're going to offer them the paper, which is available for download.
Yeah, I'll put a link to your paper in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com so that they can download the PDF and read it themselves and look at the chart. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, the line for shaking goes straight up. It goes pretty much straight up to 90% or above. So I don't know what to say. It's definitely not what I would have expected. Well, this has been fun. Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't covered in the discussion?
Well, I did want to point out one little thing. I won't go into a lot of detail, but there's a lot of talk out there about other ways of introducing air or oxygen or perhaps alternatives to aerating wort. And considering the amount of oxygen that was in the wort, when I say wort, I mean the water, the amount of oxygen that was in that water before I even started, that got in there just from the water going through the air or entering into a chamber that has air in it, but considering how much air actually, or oxygen dissolved in that water, I keep saying wort. I think we need to give careful attention to any method that would propose to substitute something for aeration. The point being is that there's quite a bit of aeration already present before you even start to introduce something else.
So, and should we say, you mentioned it in the paper, you're talking specifically about olive oil.
Well, I did mention that since it's gotten a lot of traffic lately.
So there may be people who are experimenting with olive oil might take into account that there may be a bit of dissolved oxygen already in there in the wort.
Yes, precisely. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the experiments that did a controlled experiment in which nothing was added. And I would suggest that my fermentation with 50% saturation with room air probably would go pretty well without any other addition.
Well, now that may be a good grist for another mill of experimentation there.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that might be a fun one to do as well. Well, whether it's that one or whether it's another one, I hope that we'll have a chance to talk again. This has been fun, and it's certainly a professionally prepared presentation, and I hope that it will generate some thought out there.
Thank you, James. I enjoyed it too.
Well, it was great to talk to Fred one-on-one and add another dimension to the email that we've been trading. You know, I found that email tends to strip all the kind of nuance and humanity from communications, and it's good to be able to talk to somebody live over the internet or over the phone or in person. You can find Fred's write-up, if I do it correctly, in the RSS feed of this podcast, so it should pop up in iTunes or whatever you use as an aggregator. Or if you don't get it that way, you can find it in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. I'll put a link there. Well, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can check out our low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD on basicbrewingshop.com, where you can see Steve do a single-step decoction mash, Steve Wilkes, that is, and follow me through a lager fermentation in the middle of summer, where I don't use a dedicated chest freezer. There are also our original DVDs and Basic Brewing Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. We walk you through the extract brewing process step by step from boiling to bottling. And in Basic Brewing Stepping into All Grain, we take you through the all grain process from milling your grain to collecting your wort. And you can find combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time. And you can also see a listing of the growing listing of the fine folks across the country who sell and around the world, by the way, who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online in our shop at basicbrewingshop.com. We got the shirts. We got shirts of many colors, or several colors. Well, one color apiece. They're not shirts of many. Well, you know. Just see those on basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support there. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are ScanGate 2 3-in-1 compact multifunction vehicle computer with customizable display. Ooh. And Polk Audio Atrium 45 all-weather speakers, pear, white. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping. We appreciate your support there. And I've apparently been approved as an associate for the Apple Store, so maybe by the time this is out, I will put the ad out there for the Apple Store for all your Apple needs. So look for that too. Might even replace pinatas.com out there. I crack myself up. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson down in Austin. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.